Russell Raphael from North London, Ulysses. Today coming to you from my garden because it's a lovely summer's day, well, early summer's day, we're still May in London. Uh, and, but it's finally, we've got rid of the miserable spring that we've been having, and the gods are looking to favour us. So here we are, out in the garden. I want to do an extra video series. Now, I can't control outside forces here. 2 doors up, the lawn's being mowed, so you might hear quite a bit of noise. So we're going to have to see how we get on. But in any event, so this is an extra. It's a video in the extra video series video, where we take a tangential look at something that arose from one of our readings, and this one relates to the Proteus episode of James Joyce's Ulysses and is all about shapeshifting. As ever in the extra video series, I drone on about subjects that I don't really know that much about quite often, and it's really a mulling over of ideas. I flatter myself to think of it as free thinking, and we see where that takes us. And this one is going to be all about shapeshifting. My daughter Ella recently bought me a Fairport Convention album. I was always partial to a bit of folk music, and with my formulative years in the 1970s, you'd think I'd be familiar. Yeah, but somehow Fairport Convention had passed me by. Well, not anymore. Loving the Red and Gold album that she bought, I rushed to get the more famous Liege and Leaf album, on which I discovered the quite brilliant track Tam Lin. You're probably all much more familiar with this than I was already. But it's based on a Scottish folk tale, your everyday story of part fairy, part monster, part human, who guards the forest of Carterhoe and requires tribute from passers-by, failing which he'll take their virginity. Because in ancient folk tales, the passers-by tend to be pretty female teenage virgins. Well, our heroine Janet refuses to play ball and finds herself mysteriously pregnant. And when next in the forest, asks Tam Lin what his story is. Well, it turns out he's formerly a handsome, innocent chap who has offended the fairy queen and is so imprisoned in the forest as this creature. But he can be rescued. Next Halloween will be the fairy procession. They'll all be disguised, but she'll know him from his big white horse. Those familiar with Finnegan's Wake at this point might be thinking his big wide arse, but I digress. If she pulls him down off of the horse and keeps hold of him long enough, she can break the spell of the wicked queen of the fairies. But while holding him, the other fairies will change him into any number of different shapes and forms, making it almost impossible to keep him pinned down. But if she's really strong and determined, she will prevail and she'll rescue him. Well, all this comes to pass. The Queen accepts defeat, and I dare say Tam Lin and Janet live happily ever after. Well, you can imagine that this story of trying to control a shapeshifter reminded me of similar cultural references, not least Proteus in the Odyssey, which Joyce uses in Ulysses, and also Loki in Norse mythology, given his greatest exposure in modern times in Wagner's Ring Cycle, where the baddie Alberich also gets in on the act. So what is it, I wondered, about shapeshifting that attracts the teller of tales across time and across cultures? And does whatever we discover have anything to contribute to our understanding of Ulysses? Let's see what we find. So first, let's set the stage. Why shapeshifting? Well, shapeshifting is one of the oldest narrative technologies that we have. Long before we had psychoanalysis or phenomenology or stream of consciousness, we had stories in which beings changed form. Gods, monsters, lovers, tricksters, all slipping from one shape to another. And the question is always why? What does shapeshifting do in myth? What does it reveal and what does it conceal? And what happens when Joyce imports this ancient motif into the consciousness of young Stephen Dedalus as he walks, probably hungover, intellectualizing along Sandymount Strand? So to get there, I'd like to look at three figures. Firstly, Tam Lin from the Scottish ballad tradition, then Loki, the Norse trickster and serial shapeshifter, and finally Albrecht, Wagner's dwarf, who uses the Tarnhelm, a magical helmet, to transform. Each of them shifts shape for different reasons, and each of them, I think, might help us understand what's happening in Proteus, where Stephen Dedalus tries and fails to hold the world still long enough in order to understand it. Right, let's start. Before we get on to those three, let's have a little think about Proteus and the Homeric background here. Proteus is a shape-shifting sea god who knows the truth of all things past, present, and future, but he will not give that up willingly. Menelaus, the king from Sparta, must seize him, hold him tight, and endure his transformations. I haven't got the Odyssey in front of me. I can't tell you all of those transformations, but I seem to recall there was a lion, a serpent. Was there a panther, a boar, but also non-animal forms, water and fire and things like that. And only if Menelaus can endure that ordeal does, for long enough, does Proteus relent and speak and assist Menelaus on his return to Sparta. So Proteus is a figure of truth hidden in flux. He is the world's inability made divine into a sea god. Joyce takes this idea and internalizes it. In Ulysses, Proteus is not a character. He's a mode of consciousness. Stephen walks along the Strand and everything he sees and thinks dissolves into something else. The ineluctable modality of the visible is how it begins. He wants there to be certainty. He tries to hold the world still, to seize it, as Menelaus seized Proteus, but the world keeps slipping. His thoughts shift shape faster than he can grasp them. Proteus becomes a metaphor in Ulysses for the instability of perception. Stephen, remember, has broken his glasses. For the unreliability of the senses. In the Proteus analysis videos, we discussed the Plato, Schopenhauer, Bishop Berkeley mistrust of the sensory equipment with which humans are equipped, and also the fluidity of identity. In Scylla, a few chapters hence, Stephen will ponder how we try all sorts of guises to face the world, though perhaps can never escape our true selves. And finally, Proteus gives us the impossibility of certainty, for which see all of the above, plus most obviously, the treatment of history by the victors. I discussed this quite extensively in the Nestor extra video series video, and I consider it exquisitely identified in modern times by protesters marching in support of causes they barely understand and have made little effort to try to understand, because historical truth is less important to them than cause identity. So Stephen is trying to extract truth from a world that refuses to stay still, and that is where the other shapeshifters come in. Let's take that first one, Tam Lin. Right, so we've got Tam Lin in the ballad. Tam Lin is a mortal man captured by the Queen of the Fairies. Every 7 years he must pay a tithe to hell, and Tam Lin fears he will be the sacrifice. His only hope is Janet, who must seize him and hold him through a series of terrifying transformations. He becomes a newt, a snake, a lion, and finally a naked knight. If she lets go, he is lost. If she holds on, he is restored to his former human form. The shape-shifting, as with Menelaus and Proteus, is an ordeal. It's a trial, a moral testing for both Janet and Menelaus. And particularly with Tam Lin, the transformations are not self-chosen, they are imposed. Tam Lin is transformed into these shapes by the other fairies. The purpose is not deception, at least not deception on Tam Lin's part or a desire to escape on Tam Lin's part, but revelation. Janet's steadfastness proves her love, and Tam Lin's humanity is recovered. So this gives us one model of shape-shifting as a path to truth through suffering, through ordeal, a truth that must be held through a terror. That resonates with Proteus, where the truth is revealed only when the shape-shifting stops, or when we endure it long enough to see through it. Now let's turn to a different kind of shapeshifter, Loki, the trickster. Now, if Tam Lin's transformations are imposed, Loki's are chosen and by himself. If Tam Lin's shape-shifting is a trial, Loki's quite often is a game, although he might be using it as a game to ultimately help the gods potentially, but generally it's a game. If Proteus guards truth, Loki destabilizes it. And crucially, Loki is himself a shapeshifter, because that's his nature. It's not metaphoric, it's not symbolic, it's literal, and he exemplifies this superpower gleefully and repeatedly. The sources give us a Loki who changes his shape constantly. Not terribly well up on the Eddas, but from my brief little bit of research, he changes to a salmon to escape the gods after Baldur's death, to a mare seducing the stallion Svalfari, if that's how to pronounce it, and giving birth to Sleipnir. He changes to a fly to sabotage dwarf craftsmen, and to as an old woman, offering deceptive counsel, reminded there of the use of the old woman in the Telemachus in the chapter of Ulysses. He transforms to a seal, a bird, a flea. So he changes species, he changes gender, size and function, and his social role. He's not merely fluid, he is anti any fixed form. He is the refusal of a fixed identity. And let's look at why he does this. Firstly, he uses it to escape, to slip out of danger. He uses it to cause mischief or chaos for its own sake, sometimes problem solving. Think in the ring cycle, where Wotan um, uh, procures his services. That's what he's there for. But quite often, as I think in the ring cycle, it's to solve problems he himself has created. And he's boundary testing. He explores the limits of gender, of morality, and cosmic order. So Loki is the mythic embodiment of instability. He is the world's refusal to stay coherent. And this is where he becomes relevant to Joyce. Let's look at Loki and modernism. His shape-shifting resonates with Joyce's stylistic metamorphosis, the various different chapters, all in different styles, with Stephen's unstable consciousness, the modernist suspicion of fixed identity. I refer you here to my EVS video on existentialism, broadly relating to the Scylla and Charybdis episode, and why modernist writers are particularly drawn to its themes, and to the collapse of traditional categories. So Loki is a mythic analogue for the modernist self, fluid, fractured, contradictory, uncontrollable. Where Tam Lin's transformations lead to restoration, Loki's often lead to ambiguity. Where the forms extraneously imposed on Tam Lin are an effort to obscure truth, and that needs to be overcome, Loki, through his own power and desire, mocks the very idea of truth. And Stephen in Proteus is caught between these two poles, the desire for stable meaning and the reality of perpetual flux. And in the Odyssey, Proteus, it seems to me, is also a medium between the two. I have the impression that Proteus self-generates the shape-shifting. The forms are not externally imposed on him, and yet it is a process ultimately designed to help Menelaus. So ultimately, one might say, a force for good. Joyce via Stephen is grappling with this fluidity. How does one make sense of a world shorn of its religious certainty, yet cope one must, because religious certainty just makes even less sense, at least to Stephen. Now let's turn to Albrecht, the last of our three examples beyond Proteus. His is shape-shifting as power and domination. We meet him in Wagner's Ring Cycle, particularly, well, throughout all four operas, in fact. And Loki here too plays a significant role, and I think for both sides, typifying Loki. Albrecht is not a natural shapeshifter. He gains the ability, like Tam Lin, through an extraneous force, in this case, the Tarnhelm, a magical helmet that allows its wearer to assume any form, and he uses it to become a dragon to intimidate and a toad to hide. And his transformations are not existential like Loki's, nor revelatory like Tam Lin's. They are instrumental. They serve one purpose: power. He wants to control. He wants to dominate. And with the magical gold, he thinks he can. And Albrecht's shape shifting is the dark mirror of Loki's playfulness. It is the weaponization of transformation. It is the means enabling Albrecht to keep hold of that gold. And with it, one controls the universe. And Wagner does not treat him kindly, nor unfairly. Albrecht's transformation are tied to tyranny, the renunciation of love, to the pursuit of absolute control. Of course, one can argue that it was the previous order of the gods that was tyrannical, and Albrecht's move was the revolutionary shapeshift to a new and perhaps Marxist order before power again corrupts. But then with Wagner, wonderful, amazing Wagner, the art, not the horrible man, with Wagner, all arguments are possible. But he does present, Albrecht, a third model, shapeshifting as coercive power. And that too has something to say about Ulysses. So let's use all this and come back to Joyce. So we have Tam Lin, Loki, and Albrecht. What do they tell us about Stephen? For surely Joyce's desire to have the episode entitled Proteus was not an idle whim. He meant us to get something from this. Tam Lin's ordeal is about holding on through terror. Stephen cannot hold on. His thoughts slip away. His perceptions dissolve. He is a man who cannot yet endure the transformations of his own mind. Loki's radical fluidity mirrors Stephen's consciousness, the shifting, the instability, the contradictions, sometimes playfulness, and the self-undermining. You'll recall he doesn't believe his Hamlet theory in Scylla and Charybdis. Stephen is not a trickster, but his mind behaves a little like one. He cannot fix himself in place, particularly, as I was saying, in this post-religious, he's discarded religious, which provides order and certainty. So in this post-religious state of mind, Stephen is a little lost. Albrecht's transformation are about power. Stephen has none, but he desires it. His Hamlet theory is all about his personal power of artistic creation. Yet currently he cannot dominate even his own perceptions. And so the three figures triangulate Stephen's crisis. Tam Lin, the desire for stability, Loki, the reality of flux, and Albrecht, the fantasy of control. Stephen is caught between them, unable to seize Proteus, unable to endure the transformations, unable to impose order. So let's wrap up. Shape-shifting myths endure because they express something fundamental about human experience. We are not fixed beings. We change. We contradict ourselves. We constantly switch one mask for another. Albeit one may say masks are one thing, fundamental identity is another. Joyce sort of understood and pondered on this. Stephen suffers it, Loki revels in it, Tam Lin survives it, Albrecht abuses it. And Proteus, the sea god, who will not stay still, becomes the perfect emblem for a modern consciousness, trying to make sense of a world that refuses to hold its shape. Joyce's genius is to take this ancient mythic motif and turn it inwards. The shape-shifting happens not in the world, but in the mind, not in the body, but in perception. There's our lawnmower. Not in myth, but in modernity. I'm going to see if I can speak louder here and outpace it. Is this our own Protean struggle? And that is why Proteus remains one of the most challenging, exhilarating, and disorienting chapters in all of literature. It is the moment when Joyce asks us to confront the shape-shifting nature of reality itself. Many years ago, a teacher once told me that life was full of unavoidable, there I nearly said ineluctable, but life was full of unavoidable contradictions. The trick was how to cope with them. Thank you. There we are. That's my thoughts on shape-shifting. Hope it was food for some thoughts on your part. And there we go. See you next time beyond the extra video series for more normal reading or analysis. For now, I'm Russell Raphael from North London, Ulysses. Bye-bye.